Welcome to the Known Experience. So glad you're joining us for this episode. Before we jump into it, I want to let you know about something we just confirmed today. We have our next Known Experience adventure coming up. That's going to be October 5th through 8th in Winter Park, Colorado. We have got a huge log castle that looks over the mountains. We're going to be doing some great hiking, fishing, maybe some downhill mountain biking. And most of all, we'll be spending time together around the fire pit, around great food, just getting to know each other, sharing about our own lives, learning from each other. That's what the Known Experience is all about. So if you're interested, there'll be a link in the show notes. You can click right here to find out more, or you can go to our website, knownexperience.com. In the meantime, settle in for this episode. It's a good one. I joined Sean in Durham, North Carolina in his new restaurant to hear all about the journey of the last 3 years that's gotten him there, all the challenges, the fears, the failures, all the things that we go through whenever we're pursuing a worthwhile endeavor. So I know you'll be encouraged by it just like I was. Thanks for joining us again. Welcome to the Known Experience podcast. We are here live and on location together in the same space, coming to you from Durham, North Carolina. Sean, tell us where we're at today.
Yeah, we are in my new restaurant and bakery. It's called Guglhupf in Durham, North Carolina, and Chapel Hill.
Guglhupf. How do you spell that?
Guglhupf.
Are you sure?
I am positive. I was just trying to add a little dramatic pause to that.
That was fantastic, dramatic pause. And so we're gonna talk today about the story of how we ended up sitting in Sean's restaurant in Durham, North Carolina, and it's a restaurant that previously existed, but Sean's the new owner of it. We'll get more to those details later. But before we get started, cheers. We've not been able to cheers each other at during a podcast before. Before we get into that story, I want to talk about why I wanted to do this podcast here with the two of us sharing your story. And it's because, week after week, you and I get to hear stories of people who have overcome adversity, people who have faced failure and persevered. And, when you invited me out here to celebrate this new venture, you said, hey, people don't often celebrate enough their wins with the people that help them get there, their friends. And I realized, I thought back over this story, you have a story every bit as legitimate and compelling as all the people that we bring on this podcast. And I want to share that story, right?
Yeah.
And I know at first you were kind of like, John, are you sure? You sure anybody cares about my story? But as you thought about it, you recognize that too, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I called it a filler episode. I'm like, I guess it could be a filler episode, right? Which is kind of, it's lame, right? It's negative self-talk, and it kind of minimizes your journey, which isn't cool, right? And I think, it grew on me. I was like, this is, if I'm inviting friends and family to fly in, and it obviously means a lot to me, right? And what led up to it. And so, it is worth talking about.
Absolutely. And if you hear a bunch of plates and knives and forks and stuff in the background, it's because we wanted to record it right here where it's all happening. So bear with us on that. So let's go back to the start, as my friend, our mutual friend Chris Martin likes to say. It started walking into a glass gallery in West Palm Beach, Florida, and it was Sean's brother. If you don't know what a glass gallery is, think of an art gallery full of glass sculpture. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably can't afford the glass sculpture that was in this gallery. Yeah. I think the cheapest piece was like $1,500, and I was afraid to walk around anything. But Sean had this little coffee shop in the back that was literally like a kiosk. But that was your first spot, right?
Well, we were in just outside of DC for 2 years, and then we moved down to West Palm when his mother-in-law retired, and I moved with him because I didn't have a choice, right? I did not have the money to relocate in DC, and so we ended up down there. It was a beautiful space, arguably I thought one of the best spaces in downtown. But yeah, it was somewhat of an odd combo, right? To have a coffee shop. If it was a local art gallery would make sense. But like John said, pieces were there's one piece in the middle that was $150,000.
Yeah.
So it didn't really fit the vibe, but it was all I could do. But the the community there really embraced it as much as you could, and that's where I sat for 2 years.
And didn't you live like right upstairs there or right
Yeah,
nearby in the?
yeah. There was an old office upstairs that had a bathroom and had a shower. And again, we couldn't afford um, really much of anything. So my brother said, "Hey, you can live upstairs in the gallery." And we had our first baby, who was 6 months old, and when we started it, and she slept in a crib in the closet.
Yeah.
Um, and it was like 500 square feet. Um, we actually loved living there, right on Clematis, and it was a great year. But then I heard that a local juggernaut of a restaurateur was opening a coffee shop 4 doors down after a year or two, and that's when panic truly set in.
And up to that point, would you say that you were like you moderately successful? You were paying the bills. You were living upstairs. You were. Were you still struggling though, like the shop?
I'll tell everyone this: we lived on $28,000 a year.
Wow.
That's how much I was making for the first 4 years of doing coffee
In South Florida.
in South Florida. And I was a 31-year-old man, right? And, with a young family. But there was, without the support of my brother, right, I couldn't have done it. My father-in-law initially loaned me the money, $20,000 to start, because I didn't have it. That was $20,000 was it could have been $2 million at the time. And then I maxed out my credit cards, built all the stuff on my own.
And then all your friends would come in and ask for free coffee.
Yeah, 100%. That is true, And but yeah, the first 4 years it was very rewarding. The whole people side of it. The connection was awesome, right? It was a really slow grow, and my why became cemented, but I just couldn't figure out how to turn this into something that could sustain a family. It seemed like that was not, I was just living a slow death, right? This was the dream, but I can't raise a family making $30,000 a year, especially in South Florida. And so it always felt like the impending end was literally just a decision away, because things weren't really growing, right? I was capped.
So you're treading water in South Florida, and the guy that like runs the coolest music venues, restaurants, bars, he is the restaurateur of that street, which is the street in West Palm Beach, Florida. You find out he's going to open a coffee shop that's like less than 100 yards away.
Yeah. And a good friend of mine at the time, Ben Hood, went to one of his bars, and the bartender told him. And so Ben came back and told me. And so that day, I texted one of his managers that I knew, can I have his number? And they said no, because everyone wants his number. He owns a lot of businesses, but they said, I'll give you his email. So I sent him an email that night, not knowing that the guy literally gets 300 emails a day, and he doesn't answer them for a long time unless you're someone in his life, right? Or an important business partner. But I sent him an email just saying, hey, really respect what you do. Love your spots. I'm right up the street. I heard you're thinking about opening up a coffee concept. I want to talk to you about it. Maybe there's a partnership opportunity in it. I'm looking to move, quote unquote. I wasn't, right, but I was just saying, hey, I'm looking to move. So, maybe two business guys can figure something out. And literally that night, he emailed me back, which is again shocking because I just now know the volume that he gets every day. And we met a couple days later, and I'm a stickler for people being on time, and he was 15 minutes late. And I texted him, which is in retrospect, it's just, I said, hey man, I have stuff to do. So if you're not here in a couple minutes, I'm out of here. And he texted back, I'm driving. I'll be right there. Sorry, I'm late. And he shows up and we talk for an hour and I talk at him for an hour. He doesn't really see it. He has shades on. And at the time I didn't realize he wakes up at 2 p.m. every day. He
Yeah.
stays up all night. So he was late because he literally just rolled out of bed and he kind of looked like it. So I'm talking at him and then growing more frustrated that he's not saying anything. And at the end, out of frustration, I said, listen, nobody wants a coffee war. I literally said that. Nobody wants a coffee war,
Yeah.
and I have pretty loyal customers. So we should definitely work something out. And then I left and I got home and I told my wife, what did I?
Did he not laugh in your face?
No,
Wow.
shook hands and that was it. And, went home and I thought I totally blew that up.
Well, I'm going to let that be a little cliffhanger for a minute because I don't even know how we responded to that. But I want to go back to earlier. You said I found my why, and I've heard you say that quite a few times. And I've never really asked you this to articulate that to me because 15 years ago, finding your why was not a popular thing to do.
No,
Like
it
nobody
wasn't
really even
talked
heard of
about, right?
Simon Sinek or any of that. What did you define as your why? Because you said that has not changed till today.
My why, in DC, there was, and I'll say this: I only opened a coffee shop because I was a musician before, and I didn't want to hate doing what I did it every day, all day. And so when I stopped playing music, I was like, well, the only thing that I think I'd really love is to have a coffee shop. I didn't have a why when I jumped into it, but in DC, we were surrounded by corporate attorneys, venture capitalists, IBM Homeland Security Project, really high level, fluent professionals, um, super intelligent. And I quickly, out of insecurity, and I may have mentioned this before, I never asked people what they did in my spot because I didn't want to feel less than, because I knew every person that came in was quote unquote better than I or more successful. So I would just say Bill, and Bill could be the CEO of a venture capital firm. But but very quickly by doing that, I could see these men and women. I would continue whatever they brought up the day before. I would remember the story about their kids or a trip and continue their story. And it it was so apparent that these men and women in high stress environments, when someone that they saw every day just said, Bill, there was no Sarah, whatever, there was no agenda. I was just asking them how they were doing, not how they're performing or what was on the agenda or how they're going to grow or what lawsuit. I never touched on that. And it was pretty profound to see these people that you think have it all together and they don't need these moments really needed the moments. And so my why quickly came into focus, right? Like make people feel known. The rich, the powerful, the poor, all of us really want our story to be heard. And through our story to feel known and loved in spaces that are welcoming. And that's what I love about the food and beverage space, the coffee space,
Mm-hmm.
is that making people feel known in the 5 minutes they're there over coffee. It doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be a therapy session. But the simple, authentic care that can be shown in service can change someone's life.
Yeah, I mean, I've really picked up on that from you a lot. And one thing I've started trying to do is when someone's helping me and they have a name tag on, to call them by their name.
Yeah, I love that.
And that really shocks people sometimes. So my parents live in this little area outside of a small town, but there happens to be a grocery store there, and they force you to let them bring your groceries to your car.
Yeah, yeah.
So this guy was bringing the groceries out to the car, and I guess he had seen the receipt or something like that because my name's on the receipt, right?
Yeah.
And as he was loading them in, I was like, "Hey, David, thank you very much. I hope you have a good day." And he looked at me and he goes, "Thanks, John."
Yeah.
And it was so weird.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
like we were suddenly like two humans instead of the dude putting the groceries in my car. And but I'll say I see you practice that. I saw you practice that earlier today, right? You had told me about a guy here that kind of hangs out in the parking lot that's struggling, and I saw you talking to a guy in the parking lot, and I was like, I bet that's the guy. And I walked up and I was like, is your name Leroy? He was like, yeah. And like I knew because you told me his name, but you weren't running him off. You were having a conversation with him that probably somewhat involved like, hey, you probably need to move over to this side of the parking lot.
Yeah.
But Leroy is known by you. He's not just run off and just discounted and seen as a nuisance. He
Yeah.
knows that you care about him, even if you're asking him to move, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's challenging, right? I think that's for the people that aren't giving you money, right? That's the real challenge and test of your why, right? Is your why authentic in meeting all people, or is it only for those that give you a pay their bill, right?
Yeah.
And are cleaned up?
Leroy's not going to go write a bad Yelp review about your restaurant.
No, right? He really has nothing to offer to me, and I don't say that to. I have my bad days, right? But it I talked to John about it's a very conscious decision to try and treat people like Leroy the same as a venture capital CEO.
Yep. I mean, that's what they say is your character is displayed by how you treat people that have nothing to offer you, right?
Right.
Very true. All right, well, let's get back to that cliffhanger of a conversation where Sean, with his little $25,000 coffee shop in the back of a glass gallery, tells the restaurant mogul, let's not start a coffee war. I've got 6 customers a day and they're very loyal.
It's just crazy.
So what happened next?
Because I thought I blew it, I waited a day, right? It's like the whole dating thing. I was like, I'm not going to email him right away, but I'm going to follow up. And I followed up. He responded, "It was great talking to you. I'd like to meet again." And I was like, "Oh wow, I didn't blow it." But he still wasn't offering me much. But yeah, 4 meetings later, we were partners. Originally, he wanted to open a French variety store called the Tabac. That's what subculture was supposed to be. And I told him, I was like, "No, man, like let's do a coffee shop, like roast our own coffee," because he wanted to roast coffee in the French variety store. It was gonna be really odd. Which, if you know Rodney, that's on
Very
that's on
eclectic,
brand.
right?
Yeah. So that wasn't his original intention. I was just going to be a manager of a variety store for him. Because at the time, I didn't even care if I had an equity stake. I just needed a job.
Yeah.
I was like, I just need to provide for my family. And
He would have paid you more than $25,000
yeah,
a year.
no, I was like, no matter what, I'll get paid more. But yeah, so we jumped on that, and he was it was pretty neat to see how receptive he was to my ideas. And I had to present 3 equity partnership plans. He didn't. I wrote them out, and I didn't know what I was doing. And in retrospect, he said, the deal that I struck with you, I have not had structure with that with anyone else in my entire career.
Because you asked for it.
Because I asked him for it, and I think that's what I love about Rodney is he doesn't he never made me feel stupid. I'm sure there's moments in our negotiation and partnership where I was very green, and he never pointed that out.
I think going back to what we were saying about how you treat people that have nothing to offer you. Listen, he could have hired a pro to run that space. He could have put you out of business in the first 6 months. He didn't have any. There was nothing that benefited him by betting on you.
No, he knew me not at all. We were complete strangers. Yeah, there was no connection.
And it's not like you had this huge following that was going to help make his restaurant succeed.
No. But it was one of those things. It was like faking the competency, right? Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
I think and my dad always instilled that in me. Like, say yes and then learn how to do it after you say yes if you need to.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that was, I wanted to show my worth before we were even open. And I think that's where Rodney and I really worked well together, because he knew that he saw a really hungry guy
Yep.
that had ideas um, and would deliver when I said I would. And
Yep.
so,
So you open Subculture,
yeah,
and I'll fast forward a little bit. Subculture becomes the place in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I don't mean that just in like a cool, trendy sort of way. I mean, it is the place people liked to be. It's a place where people felt was like their space. And people from a very wide variety of economic demographics, ethnic
yeah,
demographics,
yeah,
students, millionaires, Palm Beachers. Um, and it became so much the center of West Palm Beach culture that when then presidential candidate Biden came through West Palm Beach, where did he choose to do his photo op?
yeah. He rolled up. Yeah, it was right in our shop.
Whatever you think politically, when someone running for president chooses your spot to do their photo op, it probably means that spot has the most influence in the city.
Yeah, that's some weight. Yeah,
So, but you also did some really cool things. Tell us about tacos and hip hop.
yeah. I think one of the things I never wanted to have was a business that was just what you advertise, right? I think what makes really special organizations and businesses and food and beverage operations is when they're creative and they do things that have nothing to do with coffee. And
When they
so,
surprise you.
yeah, and they just use their space to the fullest, right?
Yep.
And they cooperate with and collaborate with local people that have ideas. And so I was sitting out back with Hullabaloo with a buddy of mine, Philip, and this local DJ came up to me and he's like, "Hey, Sean, I have an idea for you for the alley." So there was this old alley next to Subculture that was literally just a trashed alley, and I went to the city and I found out it was a city-owned parcel of land. It wasn't an alley. If it was an alley, you couldn't activate it. That if it was if they had it on record as an alley, that's for trash service emergency, but they didn't. It was a city-owned parcel of land, which is very city attorney couldn't figure out why, but I lucked out. So we put it would turn into the most photographed mural in West Palm Beach on the
Yep.
wall. We hung lights and put chairs in a
Insert photo of Einstein rainbow mural here in the YouTube version of this. There we go.
but it was amazing. And people would come and they would use it. But so this DJ is like, what? I saw this video of this thing in Germany called Burgers and Hip Hop, and they just once a month they break out the grills and they have a DJ, and it's this huge party. Like, so I think we should do something like that. And my buddy, he wants to start a taco cart. I mean, and Ricky had nothing, like had never done it. So like tacos and hip hop, but he's a graphic advertiser, so we could probably brand really well. So do you want to meet with us? And I was like, yeah, man, like let's do it. Like I've because I wanted to have a block party, I just never brand for it. And so we sat down and uh, Ricky literally bought, I think, a couple grills from like Target. I mean, it was a jankiest setup the first night, um, and holy crap, we put out the word on Facebook. At the time, we didn't pay for anything else. No one knew what it was, right? But it was just tacos and hip hop, and we had 400 people show up the first night, and we had just like a little DJ stand that I built, I nailed together, and it went off. It was just so fun, and that turned into 3 years of every month we had it. There a lot of, I mean, we had to shut the street down a few times. Usually over 1,000 people showed up, and the alley was like sardines, just sweaty bodies, and it wasn't special. And every time that we did it, I would stop it halfway through, and again, going back to my why, right? It was a cool spot. Like we had people from Miami come up. It was crazy. It was in all the news outlets were talking about it. This crew from New York City wanted us to bring it to Brooklyn. Like it just turned into this thing. But every time we gave away 10% of what we made that night to a local charity. That was the deal. And so I would stand up, and I'm just telling you this because I think it's important for you to really insert your why into all the things you do and explain it to people. Too often, like when you're the creative or the visionary, you know why, but a lot of other people don't know. You don't communicate it well, right? Or you do it in the back end. But I would stand up on his where he had his decks, and I'd grab the mic, and he always hated it as a DJ because it would squash the like they're building an energy, right? And I'm like, man, I have to.
Mm-hmm.
It's John will say Pastor John, but I had to tell people like, hey, anyone can party, right? But if you don't like, if the person next to you, if you don't care for them, if you don't care for your neighbor, then these gatherings don't mean anything, right? So like this party is more than just a party, and the proceeds are going towards this local charity. And But it was cool because you'd see a lot of people, even in that moment, they're sweaty and maybe they drank too much beer.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, now it's even better, right? Like
Right.
this, like they're doing something with this, and
Yep.
like there was not one fight. So when you have an urban party with over 1,000 people and there's dancing and there's alcohol involved, fights happen maybe numerous times.
Yep.
We didn't have one in 3 years.
Wow.
It's pretty spectacular. So
That's awesome. I didn't get to experience it, so I hope that you start something like that here.
yeah, yeah.
It's German, so it's going to be beer and polka, maybe. What do
No,
you
no.
think?
I mean,
No.
I think that's the beauty of this and why I kind of fell in love with this place is I, it's German inspired, right? The menu, but there's so much more, and I
Yeah.
think
Okay, maybe it's bratwurst and polka, but it's got to be polka. Everybody loves polka.
heck no.
Well, let's go. So, subculture is booming. You have all this incredible stuff happening. President Biden comes through, and you decide at the pinnacle of all of this that I think I want to do something different.
Well, yeah, I mean, kind of leading up to that too, an important piece was I had started a merchants group in the city, and this was part of the reason why I ended up leaving. There was, I love to empower other business owners to kind of step outside of their walls and kind of link arms, right? To create a culture, a cooperative culture in a city, and it's rarely done, right? There's the successful guys, and they just kind of kill it, and but then there's a lot of businesses that are struggling, and so I wanted to start a kind of an organization where I'd be the liaison between about 40 of the businesses downtown and city leadership, mayor. So I asked if every other month we could have a 2-hour meeting to kind of create a cohesive vision for the city where we were part of it instead of city hall handing down like what their vision was, and then we reacted to it, and then it turns into a news story. um, and so like that was a really fulfilling part of it, right? I wanted to use subcultures gravitas in the city to elevate everyone, right? And it was a really amazing time. A lot of cooperation happened with the city. I found myself in a place where I'm juggling a lot of balls and I'm trying to meet everyone's expectation, from the normal Joe to the guys that own Roxy's and Rocco's Tacos and my business partner, and getting agendas done. And business partner wanted to open many more locations in the next 5 years. And I quickly saw, like, when you're capable, and something's magical, there's just like our ecosystem, right? There's a balance
Mm-hmm.
that you have to achieve. It's not about, no system can handle lopsided growth or
Mm-hmm.
can sustain endless energy, right? There's usually a sweet spot. And I found myself getting really frustrated in year 7 with the whole thing, right? New leadership was coming into the city. My partner wanted to grow, and I thought it would gut subculture of what made us special. Um, and I was kind of standing in his way, and he was respecting that, but I hated standing in his way if he wanted to
Yeah.
grow. Um, City Hall, because I push back, right? A lot of cities want you to be involved, but they quickly, or in a couple of years, they start to not like how involved you are because you make things difficult for them.
Right.
So I was making life difficult for City Hall.
Yeah.
The media was on my side. But you're
We won't get into it, but you entertained a run at mayor at one
Yeah, I
point
mean,
in his
well,
journey.
it even got to that level, right? And it's like I wasn't gonna run for mayor because I wanted to. It's just like everyone's like, oh, you need to do this. So that's to go from living in a 1 bedroom apartment above a glass shop making $30,000 a year to by year 4, you like a lot of people are looking to you to change a city. I mean, that's what it felt like for me. Like
Mm,
it wasn't just about my business. It was you're the guy to change our city, but you also need to meet with me for coffee and be accessible like you are. And it felt like I was in an impossible place
mm,
to sustain. And my wife, um, I came home one day and I'd been kicking around and I couldn't believe that I was thinking about leaving. I didn't even have a plan. Um, but I'd been talking about it a while because I just didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to turn into a bitter business owner and be a shadow of who I was. I thought it'd be best to leave when things are good than to turn into a crusty old guy that used to be somebody that you know tried and now just didn't care. I didn't want to be that guy, but she said, "I can't, I can't live with this guy, right?
mm.
So you got to make a decision." And a decision was made.
Wow. It's a story that we hear over and over again, right? Like that we always just assume success is more, like more money, more influence, more power, better title, moving up the organization. I say we. Let me just say most men, I think, probably feel that way. There's a lot that don't. Maybe artists, maybe people are more content,
Yeah,
but we don't ever seem to gauge success by how we feel. So like you wouldn't gauge the success of subculture by when I walk in here at 3 o'clock on a Friday, how do I want to feel? Because if that was your measure of success, you'd start pushing back on a lot of this stuff, right?
sure.
You'd be
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
no, I don't want 2 other locations. No, I don't want to expand this and that. Like that'll mess with the ecosystem, right? That's happening here. So that's interesting thing to ponder. And I guess you really kind of have to be an entrepreneur in order to control that decision,
Yeah.
right? And you did. So you said when she said that, how did you feel when she said I can't live with this guy?
Again, the responsibility, because it was only 7 years after I felt like I had nothing. It felt irresponsible to leave a perfectly good life, right?
Mm,
Like a growing business,
yeah,
respect. Like there was nothing bad. It was
yeah,
only the internal pressure and frustration, and I couldn't figure out if this was middle life, right?
mm,
This is just what it is. Like pressure grows, deal with it, and one foot in front of the other. But I've always been a guy. I hate accepting those things in life, right? Like, oh, this is the only way that it's done, right? You just have to reach a point of heartburn and stress and
yeah,
frustration. I don't believe it, but I also think um, a lot of people don't have guts to pivot when life is quote unquote good
yeah,
because you do have kids to provide for.
yeah,
You do have a business that you may not be able to rebuild somewhere else. There's a huge cost to pivoting,
yeah.
especially when you're like me. You don't want to work for someone else, right? I had no desire. I didn't want a regular job. I still loved being the master of my universe.
But we talked about with Rob Murray, most of us when we talk about that pivot, we're really just talking about we have to lower our standard of living.
Yeah,
We're most of us are talking about just being willing to be content with less luxury,
yeah,
less vacations, less whatever. Maybe I drive the same car for 5 more years than I would if I made X amount of dollars. And but when people make, I just haven't heard anybody make that shift in order to be more present for their family and friends that regretted it down the road. There's not a lot of data out there because there's not a lot of people that take that risk. But I think it's important for people like you to share your story so that others know it can work and it's not easy, which we're about to hear,
yeah,
but it can work, right?
yeah, yeah. It's true. But going back to that moment, I felt a freedom that she told me I almost didn't have to make the decision because I was waffling. She made the decision for me.
You had an
Right.
out.
I had an out, and she let me, you know, and she's always been adventurous, right? Not many wives, a lot of wives I know would have been like, dude, get back, get happy again. You can do that,
Yeah.
but let's not change our whole life. Let's
Does
not
that mean I'm
move.
going to go to yoga less?
Right, right, right. Serious.
When did you tell Rodney about this?
December 31st of 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have no idea what lies ahead.
Not a clue.
And
Yeah.
you are ejecting from great success 4 months before COVID hits.
Yeah.
And what do you do?
Yeah. So we signed, I tell him. His response was great. I thought it was going to be sticky and messy, but I think that's something else I want to share is when I highly encourage you, if you're in a partnership, to communicate, one, be honest, and forecast if things are going south, and take one on the teeth, right? Like leave early before you hate each other, because relationships, you never know. Rodney and I still text. We might go on business again with each other at some point. I really care about him as a human. And so I'm really proud of the way both of us handled that, right? He could have handled it differently. I could have, but we both chose not to. And I love that.
And it often doesn't go that well because your departure means it's going to be a lot more difficult for your partner.
Right.
Things were on autopilot. He had you running everything. It was doing great.
Yeah, he's not the operating partner, so it was gonna be pretty disruptive to the brand. And he knew I was the face of the brand. He wasn't. So when the face of the brand leaves in a local market, that's bad. But he didn't. He actually said that he was kind of envious of making that decision. But yeah, we had a contract on our house. Someone bought our house, no joke, March 13th, a day before the world shut down.
And that was a Friday because I was on an airplane Friday the 13th of March because my event in San Diego was canceled because of COVID, and I flew back to Dallas that day.
Yeah. So we sold our house on that day. The world shut down, and I was completely undisturbed by that, oddly enough. I really wanted to spend time with my kids, and I was excited about having this window to do it. And then when COVID hit, I actually wasn't afraid of COVID. I was like, this is perfect. Everyone's staying home.
Yeah.
So we just dug into family time, man.
And we also, I mean, to be fair, we all thought this is going to blow over in a few weeks.
Oh yeah, I thought it was gonna be 2 or 3 weeks. So I was just pumped about that. Right. I don't have to start the transition right away. Right. No one's doing anything. We're a healthy family. A little bit of fear, right? But then we actually moved up to Winston-Salem May 20th, 2020, and with no connections there, we just wanted to move to North Carolina, and it was kind of like finger on the map deal, which is foolish, right? I told John before, I don't know if I had copious amounts of self-confidence at the time. I had a spot picked out, and then we get there, had met with the owner many times before, but then COVID hit. I didn't sign the lease. Had a meeting 2 weeks after we landed in Winston-Salem, and I wanted a COVID provision in my lease saying that I would pay taxes and insurance if there was a shutdown, and he said no. So I had no space 2 weeks after I moved my whole family to Winston-Salem and had to start from ground zero.
Wow. How did you feel then?
That a little bit of panic set in, but I had a contracting gig for a company in DC, and I was like, well, I'll be able to do a little bit of that. I don't have to blow through the money that we saved and I got from leaving, my equity stake. And they called me that same week. That project was on hold for a year, so I wouldn't be consulting on that project. So both things I planned on were gone, and I was in my third week in Winston-Salem. And that's,
if you're keeping score at home, Shad went from a 500 square foot apartment above his shop to a huge, booming, successful shop with a liaison relationship with the city government and multiple locations and all of that. walked away from that by choice, moved 3 states away, 4 states away, and then COVID hits and he has no source of income. Is that accurate?
That's 100% accurate. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and I know how hard it is to save money, right? Instantly I went back 8 years and I'm like, oh no, I feel exactly like I did then, right? I have all this money, but I can't spend it because I know if I spend it, I can't restart another business. So it felt like the chunk of money I did have, I had a lot, but I'm like, if I burn through this, we're sunk. I knew how much business costs, right? I was way more knowledgeable in how much everything was, and so there was a little bit of panic, right? But we are pros at downsizing our life, right? That's the thing. We never increased our lifestyle, and my wife has just always been awesome with that. So we hunkered down back into the days of when we were making no money, um, and I just started looking, right, what else, and it forced me into this space of like, who am I if I'm not Sean the coffee guy, right? Because that had become so solid, right? The coffee guy community leader didn't make me money, but coffee did. But I was like, what else can you do, right? You have skill sets. This isn't all you can do, right? No one's going to be building out any sort of food and beverage for the next year, right? By that time, end of May, we all knew this is going to be a little longer than we thought. So no one was signing leases. So I was like, okay, I'm not opening a shop for at least a year. I drove by a gas station that looked really cool by Wake Forest, and I emailed those owners because I was like, I'll do a pop up, right? They can do drive through or pick up there. They emailed me back, so we set up some coffee.
This is an old gas station that had been renovated, was now being used for like
Yeah, and
hospitality
it was
business.
really cool.
Yeah.
So reached out to those guys. By the fall, started doing a little space share with a year contract. Like at least I can start my brand and get the word out.
And Known Coffee was born, the namesake of this podcast.
Yeah. And then so in the midst of that, people are traveling, so trying to figure out what else to do to make money. I looked into camper vans, and so I drove it again. My wife just let me do this. I was like, hey, outdoorsy, it's killing it right now. I'm gonna go get some camper vans and we can rent them out, right? So that's what I did.
So you started a little pop-up coffee shop. And when we talk about pivoting, we talk about, COVID is where we really saw who knew how to pivot, who thought creatively in business and was willing to take chances. You created a pop-up coffee shop. You created a camper van business. You bought a couple Airbnbs, and you diversified and kind of went with the market. Like, what are people doing right now? They're not.
Yeah, and it was really a 12-month plan, right? Like those solutions weren't long term, or maybe they were. I didn't really know, but I knew, again, the economics of things translated, right? I was like, oh, I don't need to be in the camper van business to like make money at this, right? I just have to research values and revenue and then resale values, and
Yeah.
and so that's what I feel like I'm good at, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs are. If you can understand, you can create businesses.
And I think seasoned entrepreneurs can recognize that this is just a season. This is just, I'm going to create some things that create cash flow, give me some things that I can write off. And this isn't going to be forever, but this is going to keep me afloat for a while.
Yeah, yeah, and so I ended up buying over the 2 years, bought and sold some vans, and decided that wasn't smart, especially when COVID started, slowing down. I was like, people are going to stop renting these vans at the rate they are. So I stopped doing that, bought more homes. So I bought about 4 different homes, which was great. And I was like, well, maybe I'll just be an Airbnb guy, right? Rental, a real estate guy. And very quickly, I was like, man, this is not right. This is not fulfilling. This isn't, it'd be fine for our family, but this isn't what I want to do. But again, to maintain a creative energy is super difficult when you don't know what to do, and there's a pressure to provide, right?
Mhm.
You as a man, head of a household, you really have this voice that says, dude, it's a luxury to have your why coddled
Mhm.
while you work, right? For the millennia, men go to their work and it has no why. They're just providing for their families. Why do you think you're different? Like, get over yourself. Um, so about a year after I moved, and the whole first year, there was this whole deconstruction of ego, right? Like
Mhm.
when I left, when you stop getting texts, you realize how valued or not valued you are.
Yep.
You find out real quick who your friends are, um, and and you go to some pretty dark places, right? I would sit there when my family left for work and just wonder if my best years were behind me,
Yeah.
and if I had anything that was going to match that ahead. And that was a terrifying thought, to think I willingly left something because I was a little frustrated, and I'll never have that again.
Yeah.
It's terrifying moments.
I mean, we'll save my story for another day, but I know that feeling from being someone who's the center of community that, you know, often if you're out to lunch or something, the server comes over and says, "Hey, somebody picked up your check for you."
Yeah.
To being in a place where nobody knows who you are, nobody cares who you are, nobody wants to do any favors for you, and you start from, and there is it really does there, I don't know if there's any other way to deconstruct your ego
Right.
than to have everything taken away.
No, I don't know either. And it's funny. John's like, he was there the whole time and told me it was gonna be hard from his own personal experience. But I was. It's like the stages of grief, right? Like
Mhm.
I was just angry too, because I've really exercised trying to treat people the same and return texts again, no matter if you have something to offer. And so when I was in Winston and people wouldn't return my texts, I got so angry, right? Like, do you know who I am? Right?
Mhm.
If you don't value who I am just as a man, if I need to show you what I've done, right? Like, you better respect me, right? By texting me back in a timely manner, right? And I really struggle with that, right? Like dealing with the anger of
Mhm.
feeling disrespected by people that didn't know, right?
Yep.
And it probably wasn't intentional, but
But it probably shaped how you respond to people now.
yeah, I mean,
And
it's all good, right? Through it, it really is all good if you can get through that
yeah.
um, in a way that's healthy.
So let's not get too in the weeds on what happened next, but you had multiple business ventures and opportunities
Yeah,
fall through.
yeah, multiple
Like
six.
you'd have things that were like, oh, this is the next thing on the horizon. This is going to be the next subculture. This is going to be my next big thing. And just again and again and again fell through, often because other people were incompetent or didn't do what they said
Yeah,
they would do.
well,
Right.
I being at the stage I am, I didn't want to do a solo lift, right? If I could have a partner, I wanted to have a partner again. And but yeah, for some reason, it was like six major things in 3 years just didn't work out. Um, and so about a year and a half into it, I started looking at, well, maybe I could just buy an existing business, right? Maybe, why do I have to create a whole concept from scratch, you know? And I never thought about that before.
Prior to that, in those few years, 3 years, how many hours do you think you spent on LinkedIn or Indeed or
Yeah,
or
yeah,
wrestling with, I just need to go get a real job?
yeah. I mean, and I was way too embarrassed. I didn't even tell my wife a lot of times that I was looking at other jobs, because the idea is, you really want to maintain that public image of a fearless leader, right? There's a lot of people that they put that expectation on me when I was leaving. Whatever you do, you're going to crush it. And I'm like, how do you know that? Inside, that's what, like, but I felt like everyone was saying that I had this standard that I had to meet, even with my wife, right? Like, you got to crush it. And so I didn't tell anyone, but I spent almost every day, had the auto notifications from Indeed, like should I just work for someone else? Like, again,
Which wouldn't have been the end of the world, right?
no,
Like you
right.
didn't take that step, but as we were talking about on our hike today, maybe for a season you do take that step just to get some stability. And but we also know that when you get that, you become less hungry and you're less motivated to go out and take a risk, right?
Yeah.
So you started looking at maybe a purchase a business that's already existing, and that's kind of how we ended up sitting here at this restaurant.
Yeah. I mean, I had another business that we went to Quebec for Christmas this past Christmas, and there was another opportunity that I was going to open up another coffee shop at. And literally while we're on our trip to Quebec, I get a text that that's not going to happen. And so I, I'm just floored, right? Like, oh, something else, right? But as I said, I'd been going through looking for businesses for sale. And 2 days after we got home, I got a response from a broker saying, "Hey, I saw you inquire about this business. I had totally forgotten that I had done that um, a couple weeks before." And if you've ever tried doing that, it's pretty veiled in the front end because they don't want people to know that it's for sale. So you have to go through the process of signing NDAs and stuff. So I did that and drove out here January 5th of this year. And the broker had said a German restaurant, and I was like, ugh, like I don't. I was envisioning what John said, like all the stereotypical decor and
Lederhosen.
yeah, menus, and like I was like, man, it was crushing it right on paper,
Yep.
but drove out here and it's just
This
not
is where I'll
that.
insert some pictures and video of the restaurant that we're sitting in right now. But it's a beautiful place. It is 2-story, 10,000 square feet under roof, plus a beer garden and ivy and just gorgeous outdoor area. And it's awesome.
Yeah,
Right?
an incredible baked good. I love baked goods, and their baked goods are just amazing. It originally started as a bakery, and then she added a coffee bar, and then the restaurant.
Yep.
So just kind of added on. But yeah, visited, and then that day I called my wife, and I was like, "This is it, right? I think this is it. Uh, I think I could do something with this place, right? It's been around for a while, but I can elevate it. It has all the bones that I need,
Yep.
right? And but it was very expensive, and I was like, "There's no way I'll qualify financially. There's not a chance." Um, but I everything has a solution, right? There were some people I knew that had money, so I was like, "Well, I can get a partner if I need to. They can be the money partner," and so started the process. Uh, yeah, it's crazy.
So you started the process. That was a roller coaster of getting things cleared and approved and due diligence and all of those things. And you really risked everything on this place, right?
Yeah, yeah, no, it's if every everything.
Everything. There's no safety net.
No,
And we've been here for a few weeks now,
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And it sounds like you got a great team. Sounds like you already have a great relationship with them. They're shockingly probably excited. And the previous owner had been here for how many years?
25. Yeah, the founding
25
owner.
years. So if you're in Durham, North Carolina, stop by
Guglhupf.
Guglhupf.
Yeah.
But I'm here this weekend because Sean said, as I said at the beginning, I really want to celebrate this with the people that I care about, people that helped me get here. And so Sean, there's like over 20 of us. His family's here. He rented an Airbnb for his dad and his sisters, a whole group of people. And I just want to cheers to you for doing that. There we go. It's empty. That's why he didn't want to. It's bad luck to cheers with an empty glass. But I don't know a lot of people that celebrate their wins with their friends. You may go out to dinner and say, "Hey, everybody, I just got this promotion," but not like, "Hey, everybody, I'm going to buy everybody dinner tonight because you helped me get to where I'm at right now." And that's the reality of it, right? Like we all help each other. So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. No, I'm excited. I think that's a one thing of the journey. If you have any awareness, you should realize that sure you may have executed, but there are numerous spots along the way that would be non-starters, right? If I didn't have a lot of the people that'll be here this weekend, I wouldn't be here, whether it's emotionally or financially, um, or whatever. It's pretty important, and I think we save it for retirements. We save it for when people die. Um, we save it if for maybe if a city does it, but this felt because everything is on the line. But I'm so excited about it. This felt like yeah, it was definitely appropriate.
Well, we're grateful, not just because I get to spend a weekend. I've never had a friend own a restaurant before. And I don't know if you can tell by looking at my physique, but I love food. But I think it probably felt like if this isn't worth doing it, what is, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, for any of you that are out there, and maybe you're in a season of like the wilderness, man, stay the course, right? Fear is part of it. Um, you might get down on yourself. You may not see very clearly. Your why might get real tested. But you only need a remnant to get through it, right? I think that's a really important part is you don't need the multitudes. You don't need 1,000 people at tacos and hip hop. You need like a couple good people in your life that can make all the difference. And you just never know, right? What opportunities lie ahead. And so I just encourage you to stay the course.
And as you talked with me about today on our hike, it's not like the fear ever went away.
Right, right.
And it's not like you just had this, naive, bold courage.
Right.
But you just need to have 1% more courage than you have fear.
Yeah.
If you have 51% courage, 49% fear, then you'll take the next step, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And man, I just can't imagine how rewarding it must feel right now.
Yeah. It's been a really fun 2 weeks.
Awesome.
So,
well, maybe we'll recap this a year from now.
yeah, right.
And
yeah. Well, hopefully it's good.
Hopefully it's up and to the right. And we just come to celebrate again. We're headed to a Durham Bulls game tonight. Looking forward to that. Well, Sean, thank you for being my guest today.
Yeah.
On the Known Experience podcast. And thank you for making yourself known to us and for valuing that and creating a safe place for us to feel known as your friends and for being curious about our lives and wanting to know us. And that for someone else to desire to know you, even the not great parts of you, is pretty unusual and rare today. And that's where people feel loved. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. We hope this week you will continue to feel known in your own life. Feel re-energized and ready for whatever life may bring. So for John, thanks again for listening to the Known Experience. And until next time, we'll see you.